2012 was a year of climate contrasts. It followed Australia's biggest two-year drenching on record, and at first glance it might have looked like a return to normal. Rainfall was just 13 millimetres above average, and temperature was only 0.1 of a degree above the mean. But look more closely, and 2012 was anything but normal climate-wise. The year started with a La Niña in full swing, meaning much of Australia was wet, and some areas were still being hit with floods. The west was in the action too, with severe tropical cyclone Lua soaking inland Western Australia. All up, it was Australia's 7th wettest start in 113 years of records. But April saw the climate shift into reverse. The La Niña ended, the Indian Ocean became unfavourable for rain, and Australia started to dry, particularly inland. August to October was Australia's 6th driest on record. Alice Springs had a record run of 157 consecutive days without rain, and the Australian summer monsoon didn't even arrive before the year ended. In fact, it would have been even drier if not for another contrast. Most of WA bucked the trend and had a wet November and December, helped by record high ocean temperatures offshore. The contrast didn't stop with rainfall. The year started so cool some people wondered where summer had gone, and ended with them sweating through heat waves. The first 3 months of 2012 were more than half a degree below average, while the last 3 were 3rd hottest on record. A November heatwave saw Ocean record Victoria's first ever springtime 45-degree day. And with the heat and dry following 2 years of good plant growth, bushfires started earlier than usual. Major fires hit South Australia and Queensland even before the end of spring. So what did 2012 mean in the context of Australia's changing climate? Well, despite the cool start, the year was still warmer than average. And despite the recent La Niña events, the past 10 years have been warmer than any decade in the last century. Wet to dry, cool to hot, floods to fires. 2012 was certainly a year of contrasts. For the Bureau of Meteorology, I'm Andrew Watkins.
So over the last year we've actually seen an amazing sequence of records. It's been one of the hottest 12-month periods on record, and pretty much a whole range of heat records were broken over that summer. We had Australia's hottest day on record, hottest week on record. That was associated with the hottest heat wave on record. January was the hottest month on record. And summer over Australia was the hottest on record, from the waters around Australia to right throughout the interior of the continent. Every 6 weeks or so we were getting a heat wave affecting a significant part of the continent. What the science is aiming to do is downscale projections so that they're actually accurate or have some precision at really small spatial scales. That's where people live, that's where they want to know what's going to happen. What the Bureau does, or what my section at the Bureau does, is actually prepares the underlying data, the monitoring data that goes into a lot of those studies. And so in some ways it's creating one of the building blocks for the climate change science program. And so a lot of that data is then analysed through this program, and that's really important for us to understand how the frequency of these extremes are changing, and how that's going to sit in the future as well. Looking at the current climate and analysing that data gives you an idea of your current vulnerability, and so that really heavily informs our future risk as well.
2013 was officially Australia's hottest year on record. It was about 1.2 degrees above average. The year started with a nationwide heat wave. We sweltered as days more than 10 degrees above average were recorded across Australia. In 2013, the unusually warm weather was widespread. On our map, the yellow patches had above average temperatures. These huge areas of orange had temperatures very much above average. And where it's dark orange, temperatures were in fact the highest on record. Notice we don't see blue areas on this map, meaning nowhere had below average temperatures. Heat waves and warm spells were frequent. You can see above average days here in red, and there were very few colder than average days here in blue. The hot weather in 2013 was associated with bushfires. This was seen early in the year in Tasmania and Victoria, and then in spring around Sydney and in the Blue Mountains. Temperature records were set, including our hottest summer and spring, our hottest January and September. We also had our hottest summer day on record and warmest winter day. In 2013, sea surface temperatures around Australia were also unusually warm, averaging about half a degree above normal. Rainfall was mixed. Some areas received good falls, but in other parts there was a return to drought conditions. But the biggest climate story of 2013 is definitely the heat. Australian temperatures have warmed by about a degree since 1950, and the record warmth of 2013 adds to this warming trend.
2014 was another warm year across most of Australia. It was our third warmest year on record, with a mean temperature about 0.9 degrees above average. It was particularly warm in the south, where regions shaded dark orange notched up their highest mean temperatures since 1910, when national records began. Most of Australia experienced temperatures very much above average, as shown by the lighter orange shading. The yellow areas recorded above average temperatures. In contrast, the blue area in the Northern Territory had below average temperatures. We certainly had a hot start to the year, with severe heat waves hitting the south and the east in mid-January. Unseasonable warmth extended late into autumn, with a long run of days in May that was 6 to 8 degrees warmer than average. Winter did make a brief appearance, as vigorous cold fronts in the southeast brought rain, snow and strong winds in late June. A cold snap marked the start of August, with record low overnight temperatures across southeastern Australia, bringing severe frost and crop damage to inland areas and heavy snow in alpine regions. We then experienced our warmest spring on record. October's maximum temperatures were 2.76 degrees above average, and November was record-breaking for both maximum and mean temperatures. The unusual warmth contributed to an early start to the fire season. In November, fires threatened houses in the Blue Mountains, and a heat wave combined with gusty winds sparked a brief spate of bush and grass fires in Queensland and New South Wales. While national rainfall for the year was near average, it was drier than average in the southwest and for much of the east. Areas of pink and red had below average rainfall. In parts of Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania, deficiencies have been increasing and water storage levels dropping. Long-term drought conditions persist in central and southern Queensland. Parts of the north and much of Western Australia got more rain than usual. Summer storms at the start of the year contributed to above average rainfall in blue areas. El Nino can have a big impact on our climate, and since autumn this year we've seen ocean and atmospheric conditions generally close to El Nino levels. These conditions have contributed to the warmer temperatures and reduced rainfall in the south and the east. So, looking back at 2014, it was another very warm year, punctuated with widespread heat waves. 7 of Australia's 10 warmest years have occurred since 2002, and the year just past adds to the evidence of a long-term warming trend.
2015 was the globe's hottest year on record, with the most significant El Nino event in nearly 2 decades. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it was a warm and mostly dry year for Australia. After a near miss last year, the Bureau officially announced the arrival of El Nino in autumn. Over the second half of the year, tropical Pacific Ocean temperatures warmed to well over 2 degrees above average, the signature of a strong El Nino event. Impacts from El Nino were felt around the globe. In the northeast Pacific, a record number of tropical cyclones were observed, and drought in the western Pacific has been particularly severe in Papua New Guinea. In Australia, El Nino's arrival was unwelcome news for areas already experiencing drought, such as inland Queensland and northern New South Wales. But over the course of the year, its influence was stronger in some parts of the country than others. After a wet January, very dry conditions prevailed from the Kimberley right through to the central Queensland coast and along southern coastal regions. However, record high temperatures in the Indian Ocean fed moisture over the continent from the west, producing much needed rainfall over some key agricultural areas during winter. From April through August, above average rain fell over parts of inland WA, New South Wales and eastern Victoria. 2 significant east coast lows drenched about a third of the Australian population in late April and early May. By spring, a positive Indian Ocean dipole had developed, cutting off moisture from the northwest and reinforcing the impacts of El Nino in the Pacific. The result was the country's 3rd driest September on record, with significant rainfall deficiencies for southern Australia. Tasmania had its driest spring on record, recording 18mm less rainfall than the low set in 1914. The pattern of drying across the south is consistent with recent rainfall declines over autumn and winter, which are a signature of the millennium drought. 2015 was warmer than average for most of the country. It was Australia's 5th warmest year on record, with several significant heat waves and warm spells. We did manage to see some cold weather. Winter saw snow fall at low altitudes in Tasmania, New South Wales and even southern Queensland. But the heat was on during spring. October 2015 was Australia's warmest on record, with a significant and record-breaking heat wave at the start of the month. Victoria's average monthly maximum temperature was nearly 6 degrees above normal, the biggest ever recorded departure from average for any state and for any month. In the past 3 years, Australia has recorded its 3 hottest springs on record. The combination of spring heat and low rainfall resulted in much drier than average soil moisture. This contributed to reduced stream flows and an early end to southern Australia's dam filling season. So how does 2015 fit into the broader climate picture? The warmth in Australia and the globe is consistent with background global warming of around 1 degree since the pre-industrial period. And based on the historical relationship between El Niño and global surface temperatures, it's likely that the record heat will extend into at least the first half of 2016.
Welcome to the Climate and Water Outlook for winter 2016. The 2015-16 El Niño is at an end, as central tropical Pacific Ocean temperatures return to normal. Many impacts are still with us, but odds now favour above average winter-spring rainfall over much of Australia. First, let's look at recent conditions. After a very dry April for most of Australia, early May saw one of the strongest weather systems this year sweep across the country. Good April rains continued in southwestern WA. In South Australia, a storm surge wreaked havoc on coastal locations. Central and eastern Australia also received heavy rains in May, typical of a breakdown of El Niño. Most of southeastern Australia received their long-awaited rainfall break, while Tasmania had its first widespread above average rains for a year. Lower layer soil moisture has increased in southwestern WA and across central Australia, but soils in eastern Australia remain very dry. Australian temperatures stayed very warm into May, meaning crops in the southeast could still take advantage of the late rains. Above average air temperatures are fairly typical at the end of El Niño as the Pacific Ocean gives up its heat. Short and long-term rainfall deficiencies continue in all states and territories, barely dented by the rains in May. However, the rain has halted declines in water storages in the Murray-Darling Basin and southwest Australia. Storages in Tasmania have increased by over 6% in the past month. Historically, the largest declines in water storages across the Murray-Darling Basin have been associated with El Niño, with gradual refilling in the years afterwards. So what's driving Australia's climate right now? El Niño is at an end as the Pacific turns cooler than normal off the coast of South America. In the Indian Ocean, temperatures are still at record warm levels, which can enhance rainfall for Australia. International model outlooks and current conditions indicate the chance of La Niña in 2016 is around 50%. That's double the normal odds. That means our ENSO outlook remains at La Niña watch. Models suggest that the Indian Ocean dipole could also turn negative by late winter or spring. That would reinforce the impacts of a potential La Niña, adding to the chance of above average rainfall for southern Australia. Our last La Niña from 2010 to 2012 brought widespread flooding. But if La Niña forms this year, coming off the back of a very strong El Niño, it is unlikely to be as intense. So what's the rainfall outlook for winter? Above average rainfall is likely across much of Australia. Outlook accuracy is lower at this time of year. Turning to the streamflow forecast for May to July, at the end of El Niño, low flows are likely at most locations, with dry soil soaking up the first rains. Near median flows are forecast for 21 locations and high flows for only 3. Accuracy for these streamflow forecasts is moderate at this time of year. Looking at temperature, outlooks show warmer than average days expected in the north, but cooler in central and southern Australia. Nights are also likely to be warmer than average in northern and eastern Australia. Accuracy for this outlook is moderate at this time of year. So in summary, El Niño is over, now we watch for La Niña. Odds favour above average rainfall.